Hello everyone, welcome to book 2, there's only 2 of 2, night 21 of the Orphans Tales Live quarantine reading series. I forgot a drink, I forgot everything. Had a long day and I forgot that it was Wednesday until an undisclosed number of minutes ago. So I forgot everything. At least there's a copy of a book here because it never leaves. But other than that, everything's forgotten. I don't know, I worked today, so I have no idea. Terrible things have happened in the world. Yep. I'm so stressed about this election that I can barely concentrate on what I'm supposed to be doing. Awesome. It's just, it's all a mess. Still a mess. Still a mess. Still, it's like a layer cake, and there's always more layers and different, exciting, terrible fillings that are all like knives and bees and fire. Yeah, so that's where I'm at. I hope you guys are all doing better. I usually have something good to babble about in these moments while we wait for everyone to sign on, but I got nothing. It was warm today, at least. It was a nice warm day. It's kind of hit fall around here, but today was warm. My son's turning 2 on Friday. Doesn't get to have a party. Doesn't really know what a birthday is. At daycare, they sing happy birthday every day to time the washing of hands to 20 seconds. And that means even the song's not special to him anymore. So I don't know. I guess I'm making a cake. He doesn't even really like cake that much. I don't know. So yeah, it's all not happening, as Sebastian would say. All right. Well, let me do my intro, and then we'll get right into this. See if I can actually remember it this time. As always, for legal reasons, this is not an audiobook of The Orphan's Tales. This is a one-woman show. It is a play. And I will not be writing Sebastian a special story. I write him a letter every year on his birthday. And I've lost it again. Okay, yes. You can find music based on these books at sjtucker.com. You can join us for our concert, SJ and I, on October 1st at Online Concert Thing. You can get copies of them from your local independent bookseller. If you would like to patronize mine, it is printbookstore.com in Portland, Maine. You can find all of these recordings and readings in the archive at Catherynne Valente Live on YouTube. Thank you to everyone who helped me get up to 1,000 subscribers so that my life can be easier. It's too late to switch over to directly streaming this to YouTube, but we'll be doing all the live streams and stuff in a much more streamlined fashion now, which is great, the Patreon live streams. You can find me on Twitter at Cat Valente. You can find me on Patreon at Cat Valente. There is a great recipe up there right now. I can hardly believe I've gone 3 years without putting my nacho recipe up on there, as it is one of the things my guests know me for. They are the best nachos. I will not be accepting any arguments on that point. And it's up on my Patreon. What else? You can ask me questions after the reading is over. It's best to think of them before I stop reading so we don't have any awkward dead air. And if you would like to toss a coin to your witch, I have a tip jar on my Instagram profile, my YouTube profile, and my website, which is CatherynneValente.com. Anything that you can contribute to supporting these readings and the rest of my work is deeply, deeply appreciated, more than I can possibly say. I thank people in person on the stream if they donate, but that's not enough to cover how much I deeply appreciate everything that people have given so that we can get through this still very tough time. So thank you all so much who have, and if you would like to, the tip jar is there. All right, let's get into it. We've got more birds tonight. I know you're all surprised. I started writing a short story today. I'm like, God damn it, am I going to do another bird? I just can't stop with the birds. I don't know what my deal is. Like, birds are cool and all, But what is my problem? Like, why are there so many birds? I can't unsee it now. And I literally just started a fresh, brand new story. And it's another fucking bird, like right up in the first paragraph. And I'm like, oh, I'll pick a different animal. But I want it to be the bird. I don't know what my deal with birds is. But here we're going to have some more birds. Here we go. Where we left off, we are on page 365. For those of you who are reading along at home, we're still on the floor. The story, the sirens are riding with their toes on the floor. And here we go with the Navigator's tale. I steer the ships between Ajanab and the Northern Passage. I chart their way between the shoals, between the shallows and the deeps, between the sunlit sea and the darkest tide. I am their true beacon, a lighthouse the ship carries with her, never trusting the shore to give one over when it is most needed. My sextant is their chapel altar while we are at sea, and at its brass wheels and at its inky angles they pray as fervently as they have prayed in all their days. Which was never too fervently in Ajanab. It is easy work now. We go north so often to the floes and the fishing villages and the whales blowing the sea into a mist over their singing heads. I know the route so well as I know my own body, and that I know as well as I know the sea. For it was mapped and charted like a peninsula buffeted by storms the day I became a compass. There is a woman in Ajanab who will do this sort of work. Her workshop is difficult to find, but I can navigate a street as well as a strait. And when I say she does this sort of work, what I mean is that you will tell her what it is you want to do, and she will tell you what to pay, and then she will grant your wish in the strangest way she can think of, usually having to do with cutting into some part of your body and fashioning you into the tool you desire. This is how the mind of Folio clicks upon its way. Better a golden limb than a flesh one, which may fail. What did I ask? The Navigator's prayer, that I should never be lost. Here, hers is a jinn's interpretation, I'll grant you. What did she take from me in return? She listened at my navel for the first things my mother said to me while I lay in a cradle of ship's prows. She said, you can hear it like the ocean. I will never let you set foot in the sea, my mama said, or you will leave me alone and crying, as he did. And then the surgeon took my sextant, and the new compass in my stomach spun, unable to find north for shock and grief. My sextant was to me brother and lover and trusted guide, and it was gone, into her shop like a piece of junk metal. I had another easily, but it was long and long before I liked it as well. I looked at it on my cabin shelf with disgust and suspicion, until it seemed no longer so alien and the scabs of my stomach peeled away. And then I took out my maps again. It is easy work, as I have said. The immigrants are thick as oranges on the winter trees these days. They say the fields are failing, holding on to their green shoots like jealous bankers, and those who are wise will go. I am not wise, but the going and the leaving are my profession, and Ajanab simply the port where my pay is held in my name. We set out from Huronport 2 weeks ago, our hold full of rum and lemons and little books with pictures children ought not to see, and families huddling and shivering sick who had never heard of a coat of fur, soft with southern sunlight. I have seen so many like them. Did one couple have a little daughter, wide-eyed and silent in the rocking waves? I am sure one did. Did another have a parcel of boys, wrists tied one to the other to keep them together? I am sure of this too, but it does not mean I can remember their names. My map covered my table like a dinner cloth, and all those continents and islands and fjords and bays were my salad and soup and supper and scallion, and I was well pleased, my stomach peaceably north-pointed, my sextant safe on its shelf. I had charted so safely and so well, my equations were neat as bride clothes, and we would not go near the siren shoals, nowhere near. Some few of the men talked of hearing those songs when we sat out on watch with the stars like a school of minnows overhead, and the creak of the boards and the splash of the sea against the old strong hull. We smoked pipes of silver, and baleen, and plain corncob, and played dice for the lemons and the rum rations. Sturgeon sour, the first mate always lost, and had a head full of empty tooth sockets for his pains. But still he played, and still did I, and still did we all. And the helmsman said through his juice-sticky beard, "Galen, I swear to you, I heard it once. I was amending the mast, and it came over the waves like the beam of a lighthouse, sweeter than nothing, singing of my sister and a new baby they all say looks just like me, toddling around with a wooden ship in his fat little hand. They were singing of the time my sister said she was proud of me. And even though our dad said I was ashamed to him, what with me not being married and not being rich and not being sober and not being much of anything but an old rot holding a wheel, still I was no shame to her, nor her boy, and every time I come home she'd have me a chicken roasted crisp because I was her brother and she loved me, dear as diamonds. How do you like that?" "I don't like it, you lying fisherman. How'd they know a thing about your sister?" "Well, how should I know? But I know what they were singing, and I'll tell you more. It was my sister's own voice come over the waves. I jumped after it. You can't hear love singing on the wind when you've been at sea 8 months and more. You can't hear it and not go after it. Your heart breaks like a jib mast all the while. But I jumped after it, and I got my leg tangled up in the rigging and hung there for an hour before the captain caught me out. No rum for me for a week, but I heard them. I heard my sister singing and the chicken roasting at home, and I know what I know." "Boys," I said, laughing, "I think I can say, safe as salmon rum, that the helm is drunk and ought to be relieved of his lemons immediately." There was laughter of the kind that haunts ship decks after midnight, and the helmsman shook his hoary head. "You got no soul in you, Galen. Take us close again so I can hear my sister sing." "Your sister is teaching her son his numbers in a hearth-hot house. She's not out here in the dark and wet, bless her." And so I charted well away from the shoals. The sea is a funny thing, you know. Sometimes she wants you somewhere, and it doesn't matter what your maps say at supper. She'll carry you where she pleases. And if you're not properly respectful of her, or call her names she doesn't like, or give away your sacred tools like they're scraps of paper, she'll drop you at the very place your sexton was quite clear about having no desire to go. The mist came up like a hand in our faces. We could see nothing around us. I went up to the crow's nest to try to get a clear sight line of the shore, but it was no good at all. I saw nothing but grey and the occasional gull, which told me we were not too far out. But beyond that, I and my sextant were as lost as children in the wood. And then I heard it. I heard my mother singing. I heard her hushing, quiet, darling voice, off key as it had always been, lowered by pipes and beer. I heard a baby murmur in her arms, and I heard her rock it to sleep. I heard her sing about the sea, how blue and bright, how much like the body of a wife, how all lovers leave when they see the white caps foam. I heard her sing about my father, who had red hair. Imagine it, red as a heart. Who would think such a thing existed in this world? About my father and his tall ship and his sextant and his lilies at the door, about necklaces of coral and bone he brought her from savage lands, and about his salt skin under her mouth. I heard her sing about the empty dock and the empty bed and prayers for safe passage. I heard her sing about a ship that never came back, and a woman standing every day at the dock for years and more. I heard her sing about a daughter who would grow up to bake bread in a shop and never see the blue or the bright, a daughter who would hold her old gray head and tell her she had been a good mother to her all her days and nights. I heard my mother weeping. I heard her. You can't hear your mother weeping and not go to her. You just can't. I dove into the water, well clear of the rigging, and the splash was like a hanging, so cold and so hard. And the fish scattered in horror, the woman dropped into them, hook sudden. I could still hear her, echoing and dim under the water, under the mist. "Mama," I cried, and the water stopped up my voice. But there was an arm around my waist like a mother's arm, and a hand on my hair like a mother's hand, and a voice in my ear, nothing like a mother's voice, but sweet and sad and deep. "Why?" to you folk, always listen, it said with a sigh, bubbling up to the waves above. We broke the water far from my ship, fading in the distance, and a great, huge seal held me on his belly like an otter, looking at me with depthless black eyes. Let me go, my mother's calling, my mother's crying. The seal wrinkled its muzzle. No, she's not. She's drinking herself dizzy somewhere you cannot so much as guess. You are wet and pitiful and lost, and I have found you. But that is only luck, and luck rarely holds. Now I will take you to dry land, for I am a kind seal and a good one. But you must answer me this, as I have been answered by every foolish sailor who finds himself overboard. Do you know of a satyr who serves on a ship with very big green eyes and very curly hair? No, friend, I have never heard of such a beast. The seal heaved a sigh and squinted in the fog. That is to be expected. I am always answered the same. I do not deserve to find her again. I ran from her, and that is the truth. I ran from the forest and the gold slanting through the oak and the yew and the birch and the pine. I ran from the giggling streams and the grapevines fat and purple. I ran from the hoof-worn paths and the mushrooms sprouting in the shade. I ran from the loam and the leaves, and I ran from her. I said a great number of foolish things, which seemed wise enough then, and I clutched my skin to my chest, and I ran all the way to the sea, smiling and singing, and my feet weren't even tired, all the way to the sand and the tide. I leapt into the froth and the wave, the sea beating me back, the waves pulling at my waist. I shouted to the wind and the pelicans. I was so full of salt, and my skin was so slick and eager. It all seems rather silly now. As soon as I tasted the sea, I knew it was no good. I had too much of her in me. It tasted only of tears. And one day a red ship sped by overhead, and I knew it for her. I knew she was above me, stomping the boards with her hooves. I followed, but the ship was so fast. I followed all the way to the edge of the boiling sea, and there I could not go. But I am patient. I waited. I followed them to the skin peddler's isle, and I followed them into the icy seas where they were swallowed whole. And there too I followed. I beat the sea with my hands for weeks before the turtle whale came up and gobbled me down with her. But his belly was so wide, I looked and looked among the old wrecks, but I could not find her. I lay down on the liver of the beast and prayed to die. Time passed in the dark, and I did not mark it. When the great fluttering of birds came and his mouth opened, I did not even look up, so far was I from those curtains of baleen. It was only when the awful old beast caught his belly on a reef and retched most everything in him up onto the tide that I escaped. I looked into the flotsam for shard planks of a red ship, but I found nothing. But I have heard rumors of that ship in the harbors and ports again. I know she's alive. I know she crests the waves. The seal smiled softly. Who would have thought she would go to sea? If I'd known, if I'd been a cleverer beast, if I'd been older, less silly, I would have built her a house on the shore, fed her black bread and sardines, and we might have been happy. There are many ways of being happy. We might have found ours. I'm sorry. I gently touched his face. I have heard of no such ship, no such beast. Even the boiling sea is dried to a long white bed with no water at all in it now. We must steer around that wasteland where shark skeletons litter the blasted seafloor. He nodded miserably. Well, I know it. But I still ask. There is no shortage of sailors flying off their boats like great ungainly albatrosses. One of them will be from her ship one day. I know it. Here we have a lovely illustration. The tale on the floor continued. He was a selkie, our sailor finished, and a selkie dare not approach the shore. He dragged me as far as he could and pointed my body at the land and told me to swim. But, she coughed and seawater sprayed from her mouth. I have never been a strong swimmer. I sail, I do not swim. I swallowed the ocean, and deep in the dark, in the bottom of the bottomless dark, I heard my mother singing again. I heard her telling the baby in her arms to wake up. We looked at each other, blinking, perplexed. Your mother is not here. Our mother is not here. This is a motherless place. Gillian sat up with difficulty, propping herself on her elbows. Of course she isn't. You're here. Didn't you listen to me at all? You sing and we hear. We hear everything we long for. Do you know how many of us have died diving into the brine after your voices? On every map your isle is marked as danger, as wicked, as a place never to dream of going. Nid's beak began to quiver. She tried not to cry. That's ridiculous, Ashley said, stamping her bare foot. We sing to each other. Every creature's allowed to sing. The songs were not for you. We did not go fishing for sailors, dropping our voices into the sea like barbed hooks. We push out our hearts and our blood and our marrow and breath. You dash out our hearts and blood and marrow and breath on these desolate rocks, and no one survives your song, the Navigator whispered. But we did not mean to. We did not intend it. Our songs were for us alone, Gadir said, her face ashen. Nid fell to her knees, and her sobbing echoed over the shoals. She laid her feathered head on the rocks and cried over and over, I'm sorry, I'm sorry, I'm sorry. We carried Gillian home. In the tangle of our legs she flew as no woman has ever done, and in Ajana we left her, to collect her pay and buy her mother beer and see her old helmsman's sister with her roasted chickens. Her eyes were bruised and her lips were broken and bleeding, and the high, thin air did not help her. She was hollow-eyed and bent when we set her down trembling on the red rooftops. Her naval compass waved erratically, and she slapped it into submission. We will never sing again, said Nid, her voice shaking, as we stood with Gillian among the chimneys and the steam pipes, the tiles and the pigeon's nest. We held her between us, wing to wing, and the Navigator's eyes had no grace for us. We will never speak again. This is our vow. We will call to no one, not even ourselves, and in years to come, perhaps the drowned will call us forgiven. Her black eyes overflowed with tears. Her beak began an anguished clattering. But I doubt it, she finished. The Dressmaker's tale continued. The sirens stopped their dance, with the three of them spinning in unison over the final characters. They were bathed in sweat, their feathers sticking wetly together like newborn butterflies' wings. They panted, stretched their exhausted feet, mopped one another's brow. The floor was black with writing, and I finished reading some time after they finished their dance. The one I presumed was Nid was hitching her chest, nearly weeping again with the memory of it. We never meant it, she wrote by herself in a small corner. How could we mean such a thing? We were just singing. I think, I said hesitantly, that a siren sings as a cricket does. No one drowns in a cricket song, Nid scribbed hurriedly. Besides, wrote another of the sisters, the silence helps us to work. We see the world in our calligraphy now. And if we were forever squawking and cawing, we should not know the song of silent letters. The sisters allowed that if I did not scurry too quickly, and therefore look to them like breakfast, I might be permitted to work on the marginalia. I stepped into their inkstone, wetting my feet, in the black iron gall and the sepia and the costly blue. I tried very hard as a spider may try. I danced masterpieces of tiny points in their corners and frontispieces. I wove my silk into pages so strong they might never tear, and they marveled at how soft the webbing was beneath their calloused feet. But I was not happy. I was often underfoot, a dangerous place for me, and they looked at me sidelong when supper was scarce. The silence clawed. I wished for the buzz of flies and the splash of water and voices, just a few harried voices to break the thick quiet. I did not feel that I was a weaver so much as a very poor painter, and the heights made my head hurt. It seemed to me time to seek out a truer expression of the fly's commandment. While the sisters slept, I dipped my legs in blue ink and spun in the margins of their latest manuscript a panorama of farewell against a calm and easy sea, sailor after sailor, standing safe on the shore, whole and laughing. In the garden. The boy felt her eyes on his back as he walked back toward the palace, and a bed which had no snowflakes on it, no cold and no hardness. His vision was so full of her dark eyes dancing, full of the words he could now taste in his mouth like cakes. "Come to her wedding," he had said. "I can hardly avoid it," she'd answered him. "I will come away from the crowd. I will find you, and how clever we shall be to meet with all such folk about. Be sure that in your cleverness you come far enough away." But a thought had begun in him like a flame which smokes and sparks before blooming into gold. He was not sure he dared, but how the smoke filled his chest, how it prickled and burned and billowed. He felt his heart catching. He felt himself beginning to burn. And so it was that the boy who would one day be sultan went into his sister's chamber the night before she would become a wife and a foreigner in one blow. Dinarzade sat at her mirror, and her hair was all unbound, falling around her like a desert tent. And before her, on her little mahogany table, were cloths stained with red and gold and dark blue. Her eyes were tired, her lips thin. "I am so tired of all this paint," she sighed. Her nightdress was lace tied around her like armor. "I cannot breathe for its stink." "I am sorry," the boy said. "It's not your fault. Are you not glad? Another night and you'll be rid of me." "If you are glad, I am glad," he answered carefully. "It does not matter if I am glad." She was quiet then, looking at herself in the mirror. "You may brush my hair if you like," she finally said, awkward, and hushed. The boy went forward and took her bone-handled brush. He ran it through her hair, afraid at first to snarl it, to hurt her, but she made no sound. He smoothed her black hair with his hands, amazed at the heat in her scalp. He'd never touched her so before. "What?" Dinarzade cleared her throat, her voice faltering somewhat, like a bird who has not enough breath to finish a song. "What do you think happened to the Pappas? Was she happy, do you suppose, in her tower when the war was done? Was she bitter? Did she rip books apart with her teeth and plot against the others? Did she rail like a caught tiger in that place? Did she throw herself from the tip of the tower? Did she go to sleep and never wake up? Did she wake up one morning and find that her heart was white as a silkworm and the sun was golden on the sill, and did she then believe that she could live and hold peace in her hand like a pearl?" The boy startled. I don't know. She has not told me." "If she does, when I have gone," Dinarzade said thickly, "come to me in whatever palace I lived then and tell me how it was with her." It was then that his sister crumpled into his young arms and wept. "I am afraid," she whispered over and over. "I am so afraid." He stroked her hair as he had seen the nurses do to the children, and in his heart he cursed his own unkindness toward his sister, poor lost beast that she was. Her shoulders stopped their jerking and shivering after a time, and she looked up at him with red and wretched eyes. "Tell me, my brother, tell me a story. Tell me a tale in which a woman is wed, and her husband is kind to her and no cold stranger, and the other wives love her as they would a sister. Tell me a tale in which a woman is wed and her children are beautiful and whole and live a long while, and her sister wives teach her to make bread in the fashion of their country. Tell me a tale where she wakes one morning and finds that her heart is white as a silkworm, and the sun is golden on the sill, and then she believes that she can live and hold peace in her hand like a pearl. Tell me a tale in which a woman is wed and she is happy. The boy's lip trembled, and there was pity in him like a strangling vine. He knelt at Dinazad's bare feet and held her hands in his. I do not know any stories like that, he whispered. Neither do I, she sighed. But it is not important. Is it not important that such tales are told? Brother and sister sat with their heads together, and after a long while the boy told her of the thing which smoked and sparked in him. She did not strike him or tell him he was foolish, and he loved her in that moment, his sister with her beautiful hair and her cold, thin fingers. The morning of the wedding came white as a silkworm, and the snow drifted lazily down, unconcerned about the occasion. A skeletal sunlight shone pale through the flakes, and all the court wondered at it. The boy escaped, his arms full of boiled quail eggs and chocolate, and found the girl at the wrought gate again, her cheeks lashed red by the cold. He told her nothing, but they smiled and laughed like old comrades, and he passed his hands eagerly over her eyes to close them. There are hours and hours before the wedding, he said excitedly. Let us find out how a spider changes her profession. The girl closed her eyes and lifted her chin, her breath fogging in the chill. It took me a great many days to walk to the parish, the boy began. 8 legs are no guard against distance, and I am, in the end, so very small. The dressmaker's tale continued. There was a place in the parish in those days which you might have thought was a church if you were not careful. It had a carved door and a frescoed ceiling, and in the pews were parishioners after a fashion. Where the nave should have been was a spinning wheel and a loom, and a raised dais not unlike an altar. The windows were cast in fabulous colors, but this was not a church, and the woman who stood between the wheel and the loom was not a priest. This was Zeda's house, and even to a spider with 8 legs to her name, Zeta was extraordinary and grotesque. Her arms wheeled around her, one for each of mine, and there were rings of petrified wood and plain grey stone on each of 40 knuckles, and each of 40 fingers was occupied with needles and thimbles and cords, spindles and petals, bolts of fabric and strips of lace, bustles and whalebone, tassels and cufflinks. She was a wheel and a whirl, and I was frightened of her. In the pews were cedar boxes, and in each of the cedar boxes was a silkworm busily spinning away, the thread draped over the benches, flowing up to the altar, through copper bowls brimming with dye of every shade, and to her. They looked up to their mistress from time to time in the mute adoration of which blind worms are capable, and satisfied that their goddess remained yet among them, executed another tiny length of precious wet thread. I passed through all these fragrant boxes, unseen and unmarked, up towards Zeta, whose face shone among her arms, whose web-white hair was bound severely back. I watched her weave, and my legs twitched in unison with her. They longed to touch such cloth, to make such miracles of cotton and silk. I was rapt. I was held. On the dais at that moment was a woman whose nose was very long and high-born, and Zeta was spinning a red dress around her even as I watched, culling silk from the rows of cedar boxes and spinning it into fabric faster than my vision could catch. The woman was naked beneath the growing dress, holding up long strands of black beads in tented fingers so that they would not be caught in the rushing skirt. Everywhere I had asked where I might learn to weave properly, I heard Zeta's name, whispered, murmured in reverence. I called her name out then, and 2 of her hands ceased their motion, shading her eyes as she gazed into the distance, trying to find the sound. Zeta, it is I. I am here, on the floor, I cried. Hello, spider. I am afraid I do not know any patterns for your body, But if you wait, I will try. The woman in her half-built dress laughed. A pearl fell out of her mouth. One of Zeta's hands caught it deftly and tossed it into a bowl already half full of white gems. No, I do not need clothes. I wish to be like you, to learn to weave. I've been told it is the proper profession for a spider. I wish to be proper. My silkworms might be jealous, she mused. And I suspect, not being yet a proper spider, you know nothing of weaving beyond base instinct. I hung my head. I am sure it is true. Come closer, spider. I crawled up to her knee, which seemed so great and hard beneath me. Her face loomed huge above, young as a bride's, her eyes full of laughter and light, but they had no pupil and no iris, being all white, smooth as a statue's. Fate, she said, putting her head to one shoulder as her arms wove on, is a blind weaver, they say. Did you know that? Have you lived long enough in the world to hear how she cuts and spins and stitches, how she never ceases, even for a moment? No, lady. It is a very silly story. For one thing, I have never cut a thread in my life. And we will pick up with the Weaver's Tale on Sunday. I have no drink to cover my face. My hair is all in my face because I forgot about the reading. I didn't get a chance to do anything with my hair today, so it's driving me mad. Does anyone have any questions? Here's that awkward silence I love so well. So I actually am a terrible arachnophobe. I really have a huge problem with spiders and insects generally. I know spiders aren't insects, you don't have to tell me. Yeah, I really, really can't handle them at all. So I did a great job writing this book and then the one right after it, which was Palimpsest, putting a whole bunch of bugs in my book so that I would be given bug and spider gifts forever. Look, I try not to bring my own prejudices into my work, my prejudices against spiders. I'll write about spiders if the mythology supports it. But they really freak me out. I have no dignity about it. I'm terrible. This is where Shauna McGuire and I have a delicate friendship. She doesn't tell me about bugs, and I don't freak out and run away. Does Zeta's name mean anything? I'm sure it does. Every name means something. And I'm positive it does mean something. Do I remember what it was? No, I do not. I could probably find out. I'll try and find out for next week. But yeah, I don't know. I'm positive that it does. It probably means something in Greek, given when I wrote this. I don't remember. Oh, thank you. I'm glad that you enjoyed the reading. It's definitely tying them together, but there's a whole bunch of sad little bits and happiness is missed at this point in the book. But yeah, bugs. Not my thing. At least I haven't gotten a bug gift in a while. It's no good. I was working on a short story today. I was actually working on 2 short stories today, one of which is secret, and the other of which is brand new and solicited. So I was asked to write a short story. My least favorite way of being asked to write a short story, which is write whatever you want. I've written I don't know, at this point, it's gotta be almost 200 short stories. There's nothing I'm dying to write about that I haven't been writing about. So I much prefer it when it's a themed anthology or something, but this is just a write whatever. So I started work on that. I'm working on Space Oddity as well. So I actually just sort of jumped between projects. It was a project jumper day, which I don't usually use. Not use. Haven't had dinner yet either, so I'm kind of shaky. And so, yeah, I can't really tell you anything about any of them, except there's a bird in one. No spoilers to Dreamer. I don't want to spoil people about it. There are happier endings to stories coming. So I told you guys last time that I always have a phrase that I sign books with when I don't actually know the person and or haven't had a moment with them to come up with something personal. And what I write for the Orphans tales is no true tale ever ends. And that is very much the sort of overarching theme of the Orphans tales. So even if some of them end with unhappy endings, they don't ever really end. And yeah. So I'm not going to talk about where people end up in the next couple hundred pages. Yeah, no, he doesn't rescue her. He's there and he sees it, but there's no she sees him in the boiling sea, but he doesn't rescue her. Yeah. So, does anyone have any other questions that don't involve spoilers that we're going to get to in just a couple weeks? I can do my outro as I usually do, and you can pop up any questions you have while I'm talking. This is not an audiobook, as always. This is a play, a one-woman show. You can tell from the acting. You can find copies of these books at your local independent booksellers. If you would like to patronize mine, it's printbookstore.com in Portland, Maine. You can get music based on these books at sjtucker.com, as well as based on Fairyland and Palimpsest. You can find me on Twitter at Catherynne Valente. You can find me on Patreon and my perfect nachos, my personal recipe up there right now. Also at Catherynne Valente. You can catch up in the archive on YouTube at Catherynne Valente Live. And if you are so moved, you can put something in the tip jar on my Instagram profile, my YouTube profile, or my website, which is CatherynneValente.com. You don't have to. These are free. But if you want to toss a coin to your witch, this is a really tight time for freelancers and artists. And it would be deeply, deeply appreciated as we approach the end of the month and that beautiful first when everything is due. Oh, I hope the situation in the US gets better. Yeah, me too. I'm really hoping that 2020 has been so garbage because we have to pay out the election actually going the way it should, karmically. But I don't know if that's the case. And I'm starting to have to look away because it's just upsetting me a lot. Yeah, I hope it gets better for everyone. Seafaring Zeta is such a fantastic song. The melody will never leave your head. It's a wonderful one. But most of SJ's songs are like that and wonderful, and you should all be listening to her if you're not already, but you probably are already since I say her name on every stream. And if you do put something in the tip jar, I will thank you by name on the next stream. It's the word stream that reminded me. Yeah, so Sebastian's birthday is coming up, so he'll be 2 by the time we talk again, and I will probably be exhausted by the end of the weekend, but that's all right. That's as life goes. Hope you all have as lovely a time as you can of the next several days. Silkworms and golden sills and all. Peace in the hand like a pearl. And I will see you all then, Sunday night, 8:30 p.m. Eastern Daylight Time. Same fairy tale time, same fairy tale channel. Love you guys. Thank you so much for watching.